The cabin lights dimmed just enough to signal that the long haul across the country was settling into its rhythm. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, deep blue giving way to the first hints of twilight. Inside, passengers shifted in their seats, some dozing off with neck pillows crumpled under their chins, others flipping through movies on tiny screens, and a few quietly chatting over the low hum of the jet engines. It was just another routine flight, the kind that blends into memory like background noise until it doesn't. Near the front of the economy section, a young man sat by the window, earbuds in but music off. He wasn't sleeping. He was watching the clouds drift past, thinking about the summer program he'd just finished. A 6-week health sciences camp at a university 3 states away. He'd been the only student from his high school accepted, and he'd worked 2 part-time jobs all spring to afford the travel. Now on his way home, he felt that quiet mix of exhaustion and pride. He'd learned how to take vitals, how to spot signs of shock, even how to assist in basic emergency childbirth scenarios, just in case. His instructor had said, "You never know when this knowledge might save a life." At the time, it sounded like something adults say to make lessons feel important. Now flying home, he almost smiled at the memory. A few rows ahead, a couple sat in business class. The man was known in tech circles. His name popped up in headlines whenever there was talk of innovation or billion-dollar valuations. But right now he wasn't a CEO or a visionary. He was just a husband, holding his wife's hand as she leaned back in her seat, one hand resting gently on her rounded belly. She was 8 months pregnant, and though the doctor had cleared her for travel, she'd been nervous about the flight. He'd promised her it would be fine. Short, smooth, and over before she knew it. She'd smiled and squeezed his hand, trusting him like she always did. Back in economy, the young man, let's call him Deshaun, though he wouldn't introduce himself for a while yet, noticed a flight attendant pause near the galley, frowning at something on her tablet. Then another attendant hurried past, whispering urgently into her headset. A ripple of unease passed through the cabin, subtle but real. People glanced up from their screens. Someone asked, "Everything okay?" The attendant forced a smile. "Just a small issue. Nothing to worry about." But then, a sharp gasp cut through the cabin's quiet hum. It came from the business class curtain. A woman's voice, strained, frightened. "Help, please, someone!" The flight attendants rushed forward. Passengers turned in their seats. Deshaun pulled out his earbuds and stood slightly, trying to see past the rows. Through the gap in the curtain, he saw the pregnant woman slumped sideways in her seat, her face pale, her breathing shallow. Her husband was crouched beside her, voice cracking as he called her name. One of the attendants knelt, checking her pulse, then looked up with wide eyes. "Is there a doctor on board?" She called out, voice tight with urgency. Silence. She asked again, louder this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, is there a medical professional on this flight?" A few murmurs. An older man raised his hand halfway, then lowered it. "I'm a dentist," he said quietly. Deshaun's heart pounded. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't even in college yet. But those 6 weeks of training flashed through his mind. The diagrams, the simulations, the calm voice of his instructor saying, "In an emergency, the most important thing is to act, not to wait." Before he could second-guess himself, he stepped into the aisle. "I can help," he said, all eyes turned to him. He was tall for his age, but still looked like a kid, wearing a faded hoodie, sneakers scuffed from walking campus all summer, a backpack slung over one shoulder. The lead flight attendant hesitated. "Are you trained?" "I just finished a certified emergency response program," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I've practiced labor support and neonatal first aid." The husband looked up, desperation in his eyes. "Please," he said simply. Deshaun nodded and moved forward. The cabin grew still. Even the engine noise seemed to soften, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. Inside the business class section, space was tight, but the crew had cleared a small area. Deshaun knelt beside the woman, who was now moaning softly, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. He introduced himself gently. "Hi, I'm Deshaun. I'm going to help you, okay? Can you tell me what you're feeling?" She tried to speak, but another wave of pain hit her. Her husband hovered nearby, helpless, his usual confidence stripped away. Deshaun placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. Not too firm, not too soft, just enough to offer presence. "Breathe with me," he said, matching his inhale and exhale to a slow rhythm. "In and out. Good. You're doing great. He turned to the flight attendant. Do you have gloves? And a clean blanket? They handed him supplies from the onboard medical kit. As he pulled on gloves, he scanned the woman quickly. Skin clammy, pulse rapid, abdomen tight. Classic signs of early labor, possibly precipitous. And at 35,000 feet with no hospital in sight, every second mattered. Has your water broken? He asked her. She nodded weakly. A few minutes ago. I thought it was. I didn't want to cause a scene. You did the right thing telling someone, he said. Now we're going to take care of you. He glanced at the husband. What's her due date? 3 weeks from now, the man said, voice trembling. Deshawn's mind raced. A baby coming this early would need immediate medical attention after birth. Oxygen, warmth, possibly NICU care. But first they had to get through delivery safely. He remembered the protocol. Keep the mother calm, support her position, be ready for the baby's arrival, and above all, don't panic. Okay, he said, turning back to the crew. We need to prepare for delivery. Can you get the pilot to declare a medical emergency and find the nearest airport? One attendant nodded and rushed to the cockpit. Another brought more blankets and sterile pads. Passengers in the rows nearby watched in stunned silence. Some pulled out phones but quickly put them away. This didn't feel like a moment for recording. It felt sacred. Deshawn helped the woman shift onto her side, which would ease pressure and reduce the risk of tearing. You're strong, he told her. Your body knows what to do. I'm just here to help it along. She managed a weak smile. You're just a kid, she whispered. I've studied this, he said, and I've got you. Her husband knelt on the other side, tears in his eyes. Thank you, he kept saying. Thank you, thank you. Minutes ticked by. Contractions came closer together. Deshawn timed them with his watch, speaking calmly, reminding her to breathe, offering sips of water when she could take them. He checked for crowning, still not visible, but it wouldn't be long. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're diverting to Denver International due to a medical emergency. We'll be landing in approximately 28 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. A murmur ran through the cabin. Some passengers exchanged glances. Others closed their eyes and prayed. Back in business class, Deshawn stayed focused. He wasn't thinking about the cameras, the crowd, or the fact that he was a teenager helping deliver a baby midair. He was thinking about the woman's pulse, the baby's position, the need to keep everything as clean and calm as possible. Then came the moment he'd practiced in simulations but never faced in real life. I think the baby's coming, the woman gasped. Deshawn looked. Yes, there it was, the head just visible. Okay, he said, voice calm but firm. Next contraction, I need you to push. But gently. We're going to take this slow. He positioned his hands, ready to support the baby's head as it emerged. The husband held his wife's hand, whispering words of encouragement. His face streaked with tears. With one final push, the baby slipped into Deshawn's waiting hands. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then, a cry. Small, sharp, alive. Relief flooded the cabin like a wave. Someone clapped. Another let out a sob. Deshawn quickly cleared the baby's airway, wrapped him in a clean blanket, and placed him on his mother's chest. It's a boy, he said softly. The woman wept, cradling her newborn. The husband stared at Deshawn, speechless, his eyes full of something deeper than gratitude. Awe, maybe, or the dawning realization that this young stranger had just given him his family, whole and safe. Paramedics met the plane on the tarmac. As they carefully transferred mother and baby to a waiting ambulance, the husband turned to Deshawn. Without a word, he pulled out his wallet and offered a thick stack of cash. Deshawn shook his head. I don't want that. But you saved them, the man insisted, voice breaking. I just did what I was taught, Deshawn replied. That's enough. And with that, he walked back toward economy, backpack in hand, as if he hadn't just helped bring a new life into the world at 35,000 feet. But the story was far from over. Because what happened next, the quiet request he'd make days later, would leave even the most. Composed Millionaire weeping in a way he hadn't since he was a boy himself, the moment the plane's wheels touched down in Denver. Sirens already wailing in the distance, everything moved fast but also strangely slow, like time had stretched to make room for what mattered. Paramedics rushed aboard, their movements sharp and practiced, voices low but urgent. They took over with gentle efficiency, transferring the new mother and her baby onto a stretcher. The newborn, swaddled tightly in a blanket Deshawn had helped wrap, let out a soft cry that seemed to echo through the quiet cabin. That sound, tiny but fierce, was all the confirmation anyone needed. They'd made it. Deshawn stood near the galley, still in his hoodie, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He watched as the medical team secured the mother's IV, checked the baby's oxygen levels, and exchanged quiet words with the flight crew. He didn't step forward. He didn't need praise. He just wanted to make sure they were okay. The husband lingered for a moment before following the stretcher off the plane. He turned back, eyes red-rimmed, and walked straight to Deshawn. Without saying a word, he pulled him into a hug, tight, trembling, full of everything words couldn't carry. Deshawn stiffened at first, surprised, then relaxed into it. When they pulled apart, the man gripped both of Deshawn's shoulders like he was anchoring himself to something real. "You don't understand," he said, voice thick. "You just gave me my whole world." Deshawn nodded, not knowing what to say. "I'm glad they're okay." The man opened his mouth, maybe to say more, but a paramedic called his name. He gave Deshawn one last look, like he was trying to memorize his face, then hurried down the jetway. Back on the plane, the other passengers slowly returned to their seats. The flight attendants, still shaken, began preparing for the unexpected delay. Some travelers whispered to each other. A few glanced at Deshawn with something between wonder and disbelief. One older woman leaned across the aisle and said, "You've got a good heart, son." He just smiled and looked down. When the crew finally allowed everyone to deplane, Deshawn grabbed his backpack and walked quietly off the aircraft. No fanfare, no cameras, just a tired teenager heading toward baggage claim, still replaying the last hour in his head, the feel of the baby's head in his hands, the mother's shaky breaths, the way silence had fallen over the cabin like a held breath finally released. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. News of the mid-air birth spread faster than anyone expected. By the time Deshawn got home that night, after a long layover, a rental car ride arranged by the airline, and a late-night bus trip across town, the story was already online. A local news station had picked it up from the airport scanner traffic. Then a national outlet quoted an anonymous passenger. "A black teenager saved that woman and her baby. Calm as could be, like he'd done it 100 times. By morning, his phone buzzed nonstop. His high school principal called. His science teacher texted, 'Is that you on the news?' Even his little cousin sent a screenshot of a headline, 'Teen hero delivers baby on cross-country flight.' Deshawn didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who'd been in the right place with the right knowledge at the right time. But the world didn't see it that way. Meanwhile, the billionaire, the baby's father, was making calls of his own. He sat in a private hospital room just down the hall from his wife and newborn son, both resting comfortably under the care of top neonatal specialists. The doctor said the baby was small but stable, thanks in large part to the clean, calm delivery and immediate post-birth care. Whoever assisted, one physician said, knew exactly what they were doing. That night, the man couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment. His wife pale and scared, the panic rising in his chest, and then this quiet young man stepping forward like it was the most natural thing in the world. No hesitation, no show, just competence and kindness offered without expectation. The next morning, he reached out to the airline. Within hours, they connected him with Deshawn's contact information, only after getting permission from Deshawn's guardian, of course. He didn't want to overstep, but he needed to do more than say thank you. He called Deshawn directly. "Hey," the man said when Deshawn answered, voice softer than any boardroom tone. "It's the guy from the plane, the baby's dad." Deshawn recognized the voice right away. "Oh, hey. I just wanted to hear your voice again," the man said, "to make sure you're okay, and to say again that what you did, it's not something I'll ever forget." Deshawn shifted on his bed. "I'm fine. And your wife and baby?" "Thriving. They're letting them go home in a couple days. The doctors say your actions made all the difference." A pause. Then the man said, "I'd like to do something for you. Whatever you want. College tuition, a car, a job after graduation, name it." Deshawn was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his mom working double shifts at the hospital, about his little brother needing new glasses, about the broken AC in their apartment that they kept patching with duct tape and prayers. He could have asked for anything, and part of him wanted to. But another part, The part that had knelt on that airplane floor and whispered, "Breathe with me," knew what really mattered. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "But I don't need anything for myself." The man sounded surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yeah," Deshawn said, "but there is something." "Anything," the man said quickly. "Seriously, anything." Deshawn took a breath. "My school. It's not like the ones in the richer parts of town. We've got maybe 2 first aid kits for the whole building. No one teaches emergency response unless a teacher volunteers, and most are too busy just covering basics. I only got into that summer program because my science teacher fought for me to get a scholarship." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What if, instead of giving me something, you helped make it so other kids like me could learn what I learned? So if something like this happens again, anywhere, anytime, there's someone ready to help?" On the other end of the line, the man went completely silent. Deshawn worried he'd overstepped. "I mean, it's just an idea." "No," the man interrupted, voice rough. "No, that's perfect." Over the next few days, while the media chased the teen hero angle, Deshawn tried to return to normal life. He mowed lawns for extra cash, helped his brother with math homework, and scrolled past the dozens of interview requests on his phone. He didn't want fame. He just wanted to finish summer and start senior year without everyone staring at him like he'd grown a second head. But the billionaire didn't forget his promise. He didn't just write a check. He showed up. One afternoon, Deshawn was walking home from the library when a black SUV pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. It was the man from the plane, dressed in jeans and a plain t-shirt, no entourage, no cameras. "Got a minute?" he asked. Deshawn hesitated, then nodded. They sat on a bench near the bus stop. The man didn't talk about money at first. He asked about Deshawn's neighborhood, his school, his dreams. He listened, really listened, as Deshawn described how his health sciences class had only 6 students last year because the school couldn't afford supplies, how the CPR mannequin was so old it squeaked when you pressed on its chest. "I want to build something real," the man said, "not just a one-time donation. A full emergency response training lab at your school, with certified instructors, updated equipment, even partnerships with local hospitals for internships. And I want you to help design it." Deshawn's eyes widened. "Me? You're the reason it's happening," the man said. "You should have a say in how it looks, how it runs." They talked for over an hour. By the end, Deshawn wasn't just a kid who'd helped on a plane anymore. He was becoming a voice for his whole community. Word of the partnership leaked, not through press releases but through teachers whispering in hallways, students buzzing in the cafeteria. When the school board got wind of it, they were stunned. A private donor funding a full medical training program? At this school? It sounded too good to be true, but it was real. Within weeks, architects visited the campus. They measured rooms, sketched layouts, and asked students what they'd want in a learning space. Deshawn suggested a wall of windows so the lab wouldn't feel closed off, and a storage area for portable kits that students could take to sports games or school events. The man nodded at every idea, scribbling notes like it was the most important meeting of his life. Back at the hospital, the baby, now named Kai, grew stronger each day. His parents brought him home to a nursery painted in soft blues and greens. On the wall above his crib, they hung a small framed photo. Not of a family portrait, but of a handwritten note Deshawn had slipped to the flight attendant before leaving the plane. It read, "Tell them they've got this." And the man showed the note to his wife one evening as they rocked Kai to sleep. She touched the paper gently and said, "He didn't just save our son. He reminded us what people are capable of." As summer wound down, Deshawn found himself doing something unexpected, speaking at a small community event hosted by the local health department. He hadn't wanted to, but the billionaire had asked him to share why emergency training mattered, not as a hero, but as a student. Standing at the mic, palms sweaty, Deshawn looked out at the crowd, parents, nurses, city officials, even a few of his classmates. He didn't recite a speech. He just told the truth. "I didn't know I'd ever use what I learned," he said. "But when the moment came, I was glad I'd paid attention. And I kept thinking, if more of us knew how to help, maybe fewer people would be scared in emergencies. Maybe more lives would be saved." Afterward, a little girl tugged on his sleeve. "Can I learn that too?" she asked. He knelt down. "Absolutely," he said. "And I'll be right there with you." That night, the billionaire watched the recording of Deshawn's talk. He didn't cry right away. But later, alone in his study, he did. Not because of the danger they'd faced on the plane, but because of what came after. A young man who'd been given a chance didn't keep it for himself. He passed it on, and in a world that often felt divided, that simple act felt like hope made real. The morning of the private meeting arrived with a quiet kind of weight, the kind that comes when something big is about to shift. Not just for one person, but for a whole community. Deshaun woke before his alarm, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom, the same one he'd shared with his younger brother since they were kids. Posters of astronauts and old science fair ribbons still hung on the walls, reminders of dreams that had once felt distant. Now, after everything that happened on that flight, those dreams didn't seem so far away anymore, but they also didn't feel like the point. He dressed carefully, not fancy, just clean jeans, a plain t-shirt, and the same worn sneakers he'd worn on the plane. His mom handed him a thermos of coffee as he left. "You sure you don't want me to come with you?" she asked, worry softening the lines around her eyes. "I got this," he said, giving her a quick hug. "It's just a talk." But they both knew it was more than that. The meeting wasn't at a corporate office or a downtown skyscraper. The billionaire had insisted on something neutral, something human. So they met at a small cafe near the city park, just two tables pushed together under a canopy of old oak trees. No assistants, no cameras, just them, 2 cups of coffee, and the unspoken understanding that what happened next would matter long after the conversation ended. When Deshaun arrived, the man was already there, sitting with his hands wrapped around his mug like he was trying to warm something deeper than his fingers. He stood when he saw Deshaun and offered a small, genuine smile. "Thanks for coming." They sat. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The only sounds were birds chirping and the distant laughter of kids playing soccer in the park. Then the man leaned forward. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about your school, about the other kids who might never get the chance to learn what you did. And I realized something." He paused, choosing his words like they were fragile. "I've spent years building companies, solving problems with code and capital. But this is different. This isn't about scaling a product. It's about planting seeds." Deshaun nodded slowly. "Yeah, and seeds take time." "Exactly," the man said, eyes lighting up. "So I don't just want to drop in a lab and walk away. I want it to grow. I want students to walk in there and feel like they belong, like they're capable of something bigger than they ever imagined." Deshaun looked down at his coffee. "Most kids at my school don't even think college is possible. Not because they're not smart, but because no one's ever shown them a path. That's where you come in," the man said gently, "not as a symbol, not as a headline, but as someone who's been there. You could help design the program, mentor new students, even speak at orientation. You'd be the bridge." Deshaun swallowed. The idea both excited and terrified him. He wasn't used to being looked at as a leader. He was just the quiet kid who stayed after class to ask questions. But then he thought about that little girl at the health event, tugging his sleeve and asking, "Can I learn that too?" He thought about his science teacher, who'd stayed late for weeks to help him prep for the summer program application. He thought about how on that plane all it took was one person stepping forward to change everything. "Okay," he said finally, "but I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about what we can build together." The man's eyes glistened. That's all I wanted to hear. They spent the next hour sketching ideas on napkins, literally. Deshaun described the cramped storage closet his school used for health supplies, mostly expired bandages and a single blood pressure cuff. The man jotted down notes: full simulation mannequins, real defibrillator trainers, neonatal care modules, mobile response kits for school events. He even asked about transportation. Could they arrange rides for students who needed to get to weekend training sessions? "You're really doing this," Deshaun said, half in disbelief. "I owe you more than money," the man replied. "I owe you the chance to pay it forward. And honestly, this feels like the most important thing I've ever funded." As they wrapped up, the man reached into his bag and pulled out a simple envelope. "This isn't a check," he said, noticing Deshaun's hesitation. "It's a letter. To the school board, the superintendent, and the city health department. It outlines the full plan: funding, timeline, partnerships with hospitals. I've already gotten commitments from 2 local medical centers to provide instructors and internship slots." Deshaun took the envelope like it was something sacred. "They're gonna say yes, right? They'd be fools not to." the man said with a small laugh. But even if they drag their feet, we'll find a way. This is happening. On the bus ride home, Deshaun held the envelope in his lap, staring out the window as neighborhoods blurred past. He thought about the first day of school coming up in a few weeks. Would kids believe it when he told them a real emergency response lab was coming to their school? Would they trust that someone actually cared enough to invest in them? He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time he felt like he had a role to play, not as a savior but as a spark. News of the partnership broke quietly at first. A short article in the local paper, Tech Leader Funds Youth Medical Training Program at Eastside High. But within days, it spread. Other schools called, asking if the program could expand. Parents showed up at school board meetings demanding similar opportunities for their kids. Even the mayor's office reached out, wondering if this model could be replicated citywide. Deshaun tried to stay grounded. He helped his science teacher organize an info session for interested students. Only 15 signed up at first, most skeptical, some curious. A few just there because they heard there'd be free pizza. But then Deshaun stood up and told his story. Not the heroic version the news loved, but the real one. The nerves, the doubt. The moment he almost didn't step forward because he thought, I'm just a kid. What can I do? And then I remembered, he said, voice steady, that knowledge isn't about titles. It's about being ready when someone needs you. That night enrollment jumped to 40. The billionaire kept his word. Construction began before the end of the month. Workers tore out the old storage closet and expanded into an unused classroom next door. Fresh paint went up, calm blues and greens just like the nursery back at the man's house. New equipment arrived in crates stamped with hospital logos. Deshaun helped unbox a lifelike baby mannequin that could simulate breathing, crying, even a heartbeat. This is wild, he whispered to his teacher as they tested the AED trainer. It's because of you, she said, squeezing his shoulder. No, he corrected gently. It's because someone finally listened. Meanwhile, life went on for the family whose story had started it all. Kai, now 2 months old, was growing fast. Chubby cheeks, bright eyes, and a laugh that filled every room. His parents brought him to visit Deshaun one Saturday, not for a photo op, but just to say hello. They met at the nearly finished lab. Kai reached for Deshaun the moment he saw him, cooing and waving his tiny hands. Deshaun laughed, carefully holding him while the parents watched with soft smiles. He knows you, the mother said. Or he just likes my hoodie, Deshaun joked. But later, as they sat together on the newly installed benches outside the lab, the father grew quiet. I used to think success was about building something that lasts forever, he admitted. A company, a legacy, a name in history books. But watching you turn what happened on that plane into something that helps other kids, that's the kind of legacy I want now. Deshaun didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Before they left, the mother handed him a small gift, not expensive, just meaningful. A silver keychain shaped like a stethoscope. Engraved on the back were 2 words, keep listening. He put it on his backpack right away. As the school year began, the lab officially opened. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest. No politicians, no press vans, just students, teachers, a few hospital volunteers, and one proud billionaire standing in the back trying not to cry. Deshaun gave a short speech. No grand promises. Just this. This room isn't magic, but it's a start. And starts are how change begins. Afterward, a freshman boy hung back as others explored the new space. He looked up at Deshaun and asked, Do you think I could really learn to do what you did? Deshaun knelt so they were eye to eye. I think you already have what it takes. You just need the tools. And now, he said, gesturing to the room behind them, you've got those too. That night, Deshaun sat on his porch, the city lights flickering in the distance. His phone buzzed, a text from the billionaire. Today felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Thank you for showing me what really matters. Deshaun smiled, typed back a simple, you're welcome, and looked up at the stars. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time, he wasn't waiting for permission to make a difference. He was already doing it, one student, one lesson, one act of quiet courage at a time. By the time winter settled over the city, the lab wasn't just a room anymore, it had become a heartbeat. Students who used to skip lunch to avoid the cafeteria now gathered there during breaks. practicing CPR on mannequins or quizzing each other on signs of stroke. What started as a pilot program with 40 kids had swelled to over 100, with a waiting list that stretched into the next semester. Teachers from other departments started stopping by, asking if their students could sit in on a session. Even the school's football coach signed up the whole team for basic first aid training after one of his players twisted his ankle badly during practice, and 2 students from the program stepped in before the trainer even arrived. Deshaun didn't run the lab alone. He never wanted to. Instead, he helped train a small group of student leaders, kids from all grades, all backgrounds, who now co-taught modules, organized weekend workshops, and even designed a mobile first responder kit for school dances and sporting events. The kits had gloves, gauze, cold packs, and step-by-step emergency cards written in plain language, not medical jargon. If you can read, you can help, Deshaun liked to say. The billionaire kept his distance in the best possible way. He didn't show up unannounced or try to take credit, but he was always there when needed, securing a grant to cover certification exam fees, connecting the school with a nonprofit that donated pediatric training dummies, or quietly paying for bus passes so students from farther neighborhoods could attend Saturday sessions. He'd text Deshaun every few weeks, not with grand statements, but simple check-ins. How's the new AED trainer working? Did the hospital confirm the internship slots? And then there was Kai. Now 6 months old, the baby visited the school twice, once for a community health day, and again on Deshaun's birthday, which the family insisted on celebrating with him. They didn't bring gifts. They brought cake, photos, and stories. Kai, now sitting up on his own, babbled happily whenever he saw Deshaun, reaching out with chubby hands like he remembered the voice that had calmed his mother mid-flight. Deshaun would hold him gently, careful but comfortable, and the parents would watch with quiet awe, as if witnessing a promise being kept. But the real magic wasn't in the visits or the headlines, it was in the ripple. One afternoon, a student named Tasha, who'd joined the program after her little brother had a severe asthma attack at home, stayed late to practice using an inhaler trainer. If I'd known what to do back then, she told Deshaun, I wouldn't have just stood there crying. You're not that kid anymore, he said. Now you're the one who knows. A few weeks later, during a basketball game at a rival school, Tasha was in the stands when a player collapsed on the court, sudden, without warning. While others froze, she ran onto the floor, checked his breathing, rolled him onto his side, and called for help. Paramedics later said her actions prevented brain damage from lack of oxygen. The local paper ran a story. East Side student's training saves athlete's life. When Deshaun saw her after, he didn't say, I'm proud of you. He just handed her a new lanyard with her certified responder badge and said, you earned this. That moment, small, unrecorded, human, was worth more than any award. The program's success didn't go unnoticed beyond the school walls. The city's health department reached out, asking if they could use the East Side model as a blueprint for other underfunded schools. A regional hospital offered to train teachers as certified instructors. Even the state education board sent a representative to observe a session. Deshaun was invited to speak at a youth leadership summit, not as a hero, but as a peer sharing what community-driven change could look like. He almost said no. Public speaking still made his stomach twist. But then he remembered the freshman who'd asked, do you think I could really learn to do what you did? If he backed out now, what message would that send? So he went. And instead of giving a polished speech, he told stories. About Tasha. About the broken CPR dummy they'd fixed with duct tape before the new ones arrived. About the day a group of students taught basic choking rescue to the school's custodial staff. This isn't about one person, he said, standing in front of hundreds of students from across the state. It's about passing the knowledge forward, like a relay race where everyone gets to run a lap. Afterward, kids lined up to talk to him. Not for autographs, but for advice. How do I start something like this at my school? What if my principal says no? Can I really make a difference if I'm just a student? Deshaun answered each one honestly. Start small. Find one teacher who believes in you. Teach one friend. Show, don't tell. And never underestimate how much your voice matters. Back home, the lab kept growing. They added a mental health first aid module after students requested it, recognizing anxiety attacks, offering support without judgment, knowing when to get adult help. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. And it was saving lives in quieter, deeper ways. Meanwhile, the billionaire's perspective had shifted in ways he hadn't expected. He'd always measured impact in metrics, users, revenue, market share. But now he found himself moved by things that couldn't be charted. The confidence in a shy student's voice after they led their first drill. The way parents hugged him at school events not because of his wealth, but because their kids finally felt seen. One evening, while reviewing a report on the program's expansion plan, he paused on a photo someone had sent him. It showed Deshaun kneeling beside a group of freshmen, guiding their hands on a mannequin, his expression patient and focused. The caption read to today's lesson, "You don't need a title to be someone's lifeline." He printed the photo and taped it to his office wall, right next to pictures of his wife and son. He also started volunteering, not with fanfare, but in disguise almost. He'd show up at weekend sessions wearing a baseball cap and old jeans, helping set up chairs or wash training equipment. The students didn't recognize him at first. They just thought he was a quiet dad who liked to help out. When one finally asked, "Hey, aren't you?" he just smiled and said, "Just here to learn." Like everyone else, and in a way, he was. As spring arrived, the program hit a milestone. Its first cohort of students passed their National Emergency Responder Certification exam, 100% success rate. The school threw a small celebration in the lab. Balloons, pizza, and certificates handed out one by one. Deshaun watched as each student stood tall, some wiping away tears, others grinning like they'd just unlocked a secret level in life. Afterward, he found himself alone in the room. The lights dimmed, the mannequins lined up like silent witnesses. He ran a hand over the counter where he'd once unboxed that first neonatal trainer. It felt surreal, how a single moment on a plane had led to this space filled with possibility. His phone buzzed. A text from the billionaire. "They're not just certified responders. They're hope with hands." Deshaun smiled and typed back, "And it's only the beginning." Later that week, the city announced a pilot initiative. 5 more high schools would launch similar labs by fall, all modeled after Eastside's program. Funding came from a mix of public grants and private donors, many inspired by what they'd seen happen in one unassuming classroom. But the most unexpected turn came from the students themselves. They started a Train the Trainer weekend camp, inviting kids from middle schools across the district to learn basic skills: how to call 911 properly, how to stop bleeding, how to comfort someone in distress. Deshaun helped design the curriculum, but the teaching was all student-led. On the first Saturday, over 80 middle schoolers showed up. By the third, they had to turn people away. One of the youngest participants, a quiet boy with glasses too big for his face, pulled Deshaun aside at the end of the day. "My mom's a nurse," he said softly. "She says people like you are rare." Deshaun knelt. "People like me are everywhere. They just need a chance to step up." The boy nodded, clutching his beginner's first aid card like it was a treasure. "I'm gonna be ready," he said. And in that moment, Deshaun knew the circle was closing. Not ending, but continuing. The knowledge wasn't staying with him. It was spreading like light through a window, reaching corners he'd never even seen. At home, life remained ordinary in the best way. Deshaun still did laundry, argued with his brother over the TV remote, and worried about college applications. But now, when he walked down the hall at school, students didn't just whisper, "That's the guy from the plane." They said, "There's Deshaun. He's the one who showed us we could help." And that, more than anything, was the real victory. Because saving one life on a plane was extraordinary, but building a generation that knows how to save each other, that was legacy. The morning of the community unveiling felt different. Not flashy, not loud, but full of a quiet kind of weight. Like the air before a storm breaks or a seed finally cracks open. The new training lab wasn't just a room anymore. It was a promise made real, and today the whole neighborhood was invited to see it. Deshaun arrived early, before the crowd, before the speeches, before the cameras. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, taking it all in. The walls were still the same calming blue, but now they held student-made posters. Know the signs of stroke, how to help someone having a panic attack. You don't need to be a doctor to save a life. The mannequins sat ready, the AED trainers charged, the neonatal simulators blinking softly with programmed heartbeats. In one corner, a display showed photos from the past year, students practicing tourniquets, teaching CPR to seniors at the community center, even leading a session at the local Boys and Girls Club. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. He ran a hand over the counter where he'd once unboxed that first stethoscope, the one that now hung around the neck of a nervous freshman during every drill. He thought about how far they'd come, from a cramped closet full of expired bandages to a space where kids walked in feeling invisible and walked out feeling capable. A voice behind him broke the silence. "You did this," Deshawn turned. The billionaire stood there holding Kai's hand. The boy was almost a year old now, walking with wobbly confidence, his eyes wide with curiosity. He tugged free and toddled straight to Deshawn, arms outstretched. "Up," he demanded. Deshawn laughed and lifted him gently. Kai patted his face like it was the most natural thing in the world. "He asks for you," the man said, smiling. "Every time he sees a plane in the sky, he points and says, 'D.'" Deshawn's throat tightened. He hadn't expected that, to be woven into someone's family story like that, not as a stranger but as part of their beginning. "I didn't do it alone," he said quietly. "It was the students, the teachers, you, even the custodian who stayed late to help us move furniture." "Maybe," the man said, stepping closer. "But it started with you choosing to act when no one else did, and then choosing to give instead of take. That's what changed everything." Before Deshawn could respond, the first guests began arriving. Parents, neighbors, city officials, reporters from the local paper. No national media this time. No sensational headlines. Just people who cared about what was growing right here in their own backyard. The event began with a short demonstration. Tasha and two other student leaders walked a group of middle schoolers through a mock emergency. A student collapses during gym class. The younger kids took turns checking responsiveness, calling for help, starting chest compressions. Their hands were small, their voices shaky at first, but they did it. And when the patient sat up at the end, everyone clapped, not out of pity but pride. Then it was time for speeches. The principal went first, praising the program's impact on school culture. The head of the health department spoke about how they were now using Eastside's model in 10 other schools across the state. A hospital administrator announced a new summer internship pipeline for certified students. And then the billionaire stepped up. He didn't stand behind a podium. He just walked to the center of the room holding Kai on his hip and spoke like he was talking to friends over coffee. "We live in a world that loves to talk about heroes," he began, voice steady but soft. "We put them on billboards, write books about them, wait for them to swoop in and fix things. But the truth is, real change doesn't come from superheroes. It comes from regular people who decide to care." He looked directly at Deshawn. A year ago, on a plane thousands of feet in the air, a young man saw someone in trouble and didn't look away. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't ask what was in it for him. He just stepped forward, and in doing so, he didn't just save 2 lives. He lit a spark. His voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. And instead of keeping that spark for himself, he shared it. He asked for something so simple, so powerful: help other kids be ready too. That request, it didn't just move me. It changed how I see my own life. Because it reminded me that the best thing we can build isn't a company or a fortune, it's a legacy of care. He paused, looking around the room at the students standing tall, the parents wiping their eyes, the little kids mimicking CPR on stuffed animals. This lab isn't just about medical training. It's about teaching our young people that they matter, that their hands can heal, that their voices can calm fear, that they don't have to wait to be adults to make a difference. Then, with tears glistening but not falling, he said the words that would echo in the room long after he finished. "We often look for heroes in capes or headlines, but sometimes they're just kids who paid attention in class and cared enough to act." The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Then slowly people began to clap. Not polite applause, but something deeper, grateful, moved, full of recognition. When it was Deshawn's turn, he didn't have notes. He just walked forward, Kai still in his arms, and spoke from the heart. "I'm not a hero," he said simply. "I was just a kid who happened to know a few things when they were needed. But what's happened since? That's not me. That's all of us." He gestured to the students behind him. "These are the real heroes, the ones who show up on Saturdays to practice, who teach their little brothers how to call 911, who stay calm when someone's hurting. They're proving every day that you don't need a title, a degree, or a fancy uniform to help someone." He looked out at the crowd. My hope is that this lab never becomes a monument to one moment on a plane. I hope it becomes a launch pad for more students, more schools, more communities saying why we can do this too. Then, with a small smile, he added, and if you ever see someone in trouble, don't wait for the right person to step up. Be the right person. After the speeches, the room opened up. Kids tried on gloves and practiced bandaging. Parents asked about enrolling their teens. A group of seniors signed up for the next community CPR class. In one corner, Kai sat on the floor with a group of middle schoolers, helping them with a baby mannequin, his tiny hands patting its chest with serious concentration. Deshaun watched it all, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. He felt tired, but the good kind of tired, like after a long run that leaves you breathless but alive. Later, as the sun dipped low and the last guest trickled out, the billionaire found him outside sitting on the school steps. You okay? He asked, sitting beside him. Yeah, Deshaun said. Just thinking. About what? How weird it is that one moment can change everything. I mean, if I'd been in a different seat on that plane, if I'd kept my earbuds in. But you didn't, the man said gently. And that's the point. You chose to see, you chose to act, and then you chose to give. That's not luck. That's character. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the streetlights flicker on. Kai's first word was D, the man said after a while, smiling. His second was help. Deshaun chuckled. Guess he's already learning. He's got good teachers, the man replied. As night settled in, they walked back to the car together, Deshaun, the billionaire, and Kai, who insisted on holding Deshaun's hand the whole way. At the car door, the man turned to him. What's next for you? He asked. Deshaun shrugged. College, I guess. Maybe med school or public health. But no matter where I go, I want to keep building spaces like this, where kids don't just learn facts, but learn they can be someone's lifeline. The man nodded. Then I'll be right there with you. Not as a donor, as a partner. They shook hands, then hugged like family. As Deshaun walked home under the stars, he passed a group of students leaving the library, laughing and tossing a football. One of them spotted him and called out, Hey, you teaching the choking drill tomorrow? Yeah, Deshaun said. Be there early. We're adding a new scenario. Cool, the kid said, giving a thumbs up. See you then. And just like that, the work continued. No fanfare, no headlines. Just people helping people, one small act at a time. Because in the end, the story wasn't really about a baby born on a plane, or a millionaire's tears, or even a teenager's courage. It was about what happens after the emergency is over, when gratitude turns into action, when a single spark becomes a steady flame, and when a community decides that caring isn't optional, it's essential. And somewhere, in a classroom filled with the hum of learning and the quiet rhythm of practiced hands, the next chapter was already beginning.